Orion Blackwood stepped into the flower shop only because his driver had taken a wrong turn, and he needed a moment to breathe before the next soul-crushing meeting. The tiny bell above the door jingled, and the scent hit him: roses, lilies, lavender soft and sweet, so unlike the sharp scent of polished marble and expensive leather he was used to. He glanced around, surrounded by blooms of every color, and for a moment the chaos of his billion-dollar empire faded. Then he saw her. She was standing on her tiptoes, reaching for a vase on the top shelf, her dark curls pinned up in a messy knot. A smear of green leaf dust streaked her cheek, and her apron was dotted with petals. She didn't notice him at first, but when she turned and their eyes met, something shifted. "Oh," she said, startled. "Sorry, we're about to close in 10 minutes. Her voice was low and warm, like honey over tea. "I won't take long." Orion stepped forward, the polished soles of his shoes clicking softly against the wooden floor. "I just need something." She raised an eyebrow. "That's vague. Anniversary, apology, first date." He hesitated. "Funeral." Her face softened immediately. "I'm sorry." "For you, no," he said after a beat. "For someone I used to know." She didn't press. Instead, she turned and walked toward one of the coolers, pulling out a soft arrangement of white roses, baby's breath, and eucalyptus. "This one's gentle, peaceful," he nodded. "That'll do." She carefully wrapped it in soft paper, tying it with a silver ribbon. "I'm Georgia Willow. Just opened this place 6 months ago. You're not from around here." Orion gave a small smile. "Not exactly." He didn't offer his name. He never did. Not unless it was for business, and this had already started to feel like something else. He handed her his black card, and she blinked at it, then looked up at him. "This is a $200 arrangement." He said nothing. She rang him up, sliding the card through silently. "Rough day?" she asked softly, handing him the bouquet. He paused, staring down at the flowers. "You could say that. Hope they help," she said. He turned to go, but stopped at the door. "Do you make custom arrangements?" She tilted her head. "Sure." "For what?" "I don't know yet," he said, then left. 3 days later, he came back. This time he didn't pretend he had a reason. He stepped inside, and Georgia looked up from watering a row of orchids. "You're back," she said, surprised but not unfriendly. "I need flowers." For he stared at her, then said, "My office." She blinked. "Your office?" He nodded. "They said they make people happier." "Who's they?" "People who have offices with things in them," he said dryly. She laughed a real, full laugh, and Orion felt something shift in his chest. "Well, I can throw something together," she said, already walking toward the back with her apron fluttering behind her. "You want modern, soft, bright?" "Whatever you think," he said. "I trust you." She slowed, glancing over her shoulder. "You don't even know me." "I know you take care with what you do," he said. "That's enough." She didn't answer, but when she brought out a clean, structured bouquet of white tulips and pale blue hydrangeas in a hand-blown glass vase, he could tell she had tried harder than she meant to. He paid again without blinking, then lingered a second too long. "Do you always buy flowers from the same place?" she asked, watching him. "I don't usually buy them at all, so why me?" He paused. "You looked like you meant it that first day." She folded her arms. "I did." "Not everyone does," he said quietly, then he left again. By the 4th visit, she stopped pretending it was strange. "You want coffee?" she asked, handing him a bouquet of peonies and ranunculus. He blinked. "You make coffee here?" "No," she said, slipping off her apron, "but there's a cafe next door. And I'm due for a break." They sat on the bench outside, sipping lattes and watching the street. "You don't talk much," she said, glancing sideways at him. "I talk all day," he replied. "I like silence when I can get it. But you come here and talk to me." He looked at her over the rim of his cup. "I don't mind your kind of noise." It was the first time her cheeks flushed. "Still won't tell me your name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Orion," she blinked. "Like the constellation," he nodded. "You sound like someone important." "I am," he said, not joking. She laughed, assuming he was teasing. "Well, Mr. Important, I hope you know you're developing a flower addiction." He watched her, amused. "Is that a thing?" "It is now," she said, nudging his shoulder with hers. That night, Georgia stayed late, rearranging the displays. She didn't know why, but she wanted the place to look better, cleaner, warmer. The next morning, she found a note tucked between a bouquet of sunflowers on the front counter. "You make the world a little softer." Oh, she stood there for a long time, holding the note, heart thudding. Orion knew he was in trouble the day he canceled a board meeting just to watch her arrange cherry blossoms in the shop window. He sat on the stool near the register like he belonged there, sipping the tea she'd made him. "You ever gonna tell me what you actually do?" she asked, tying off a bundle of lavender. "Nope." "Why not?" "Because I like how you talk to me when you don't know." She rolled her eyes. "You're not a hitman, are you?" He grinned. "No, I build things, companies." She said. Still vague. "Gotta keep some mystery," he said. Georgia paused. "You know, you're not as cold as you pretend to be." He looked up, surprised. "I'm not." "No," she said. "You're just guarded." There was silence between them for a moment. "Maybe you scare people away before they can hurt you," she said softly, not looking at him. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, it was quiet. Maybe. That evening, he dropped her off at her apartment after walking her home for the first time. The streetlight glowed golden over her shoulders, and she looked up at him, half smiling. This was nice. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, voice low. "I'm closed tomorrow." "I'll still see you," he said, and he did. What started with a wrong turn was slowly becoming the most right thing he'd done in years. But he still hadn't told her the truth, that he was Orion Blackwood, billionaire CEO of Blackwood & Co., with a penthouse in Manhattan, a private jet, and a life people only saw in magazines. Because somehow, with Georgia Willow, none of that mattered, and he wasn't sure what scared him more, losing her when she found out, or admitting he was already falling for her. The first time Georgia saw Orion in daylight outside the shop, he was standing in the middle of a Saturday farmer's market, looking hopelessly out of place. He wore a dark wool coat over a charcoal sweater, clean lines and fine fabric that didn't belong among crates of cranberries and jars of honey. She spotted him near a stand selling heirloom tomatoes, his hands shoved into his pockets, expression unreadable. "You lost?" she asked, stepping beside him and handing over a paper cup of cider. His eyes flicked to her and something in them softened. "I thought I'd see what you do on your day off." "I usually sleep until noon," she said, "but the cider here is worth waking up for." He took the cup without hesitation. "I've never been to one of these." "What markets?" He nodded. "Feels like stepping into someone else's life," she grinned. "Then welcome to mine." They wandered for an hour, weaving through stalls as she introduced him to things he'd never noticed in his world: fresh soap that smelled like bergamot, a woman selling sourdough that had risen for 72 hours, a man carving spoons by hand. "You know all these people?" he asked as they walked. "I've lived here since I was 12. My aunt used to drag me to this market every week." "Where is she now?" "Florida. She says snow is a personal offense." He looked up at the sky where the clouds hung low and heavy. She might have a point. After the market, she led him to the old train bridge that overlooked the river running behind Main Street. They stood in silence, watching the water move beneath them. "You're always so quiet after people talk to you," she said. "I'm listening." "To what?" "Everything you don't say." She blinked, caught off guard. "Like what?" He leaned against the railing. "That you miss having someone to share things with, that your world is small but you like it that way. That you think you're ordinary but you make everything around you feel different." Her chest tightened. "You get all that from walking through a market with me?" "No," he said. "I got it the first time I saw you." She didn't answer, but when he reached for her hand, she let him take it. That evening, she invited him inside her apartment for tea. It was small, just a studio above the bakery, but it smelled like cinnamon and gardenia. He noticed the stack of sketchbooks beside the window, the dried flowers hanging upside down from a line above the sink, the chipped mug she handed him without apology. "You draw?" he asked, flipping one open. "Only things that won't talk back," she said, curling up on the couch with her knees tucked under her. "Mostly arrangements, sometimes buildings. You ever think about leaving this town?" She hesitated. "Why would I? There's more out there." "There's more people," she corrected. "Not the same thing." He didn't press, but he watched her as she moved through the space like she belonged to it, completely barefoot, comfortable, unguarded. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked suddenly. He looked up. "Pretending what?" That you're not used to something bigger than this." He froze. "You know how I know you're not from around here," she continued. "It's not the way you dress or the fact that you never ask for prices. It's that you hesitate before answering questions like you're editing yourself in real time." He set the mug down. "You think I'm lying?" "No," she said. "I think you're hiding." He stood. "Maybe I am." "Then why come back?" His voice was quiet. "Because with you, I don't have to be anyone else." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, softly, "I don't want a version of you, I want the real one." He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "What if the real one's not what you expect? Then I'll deal with it. But don't make me fall for someone who doesn't exist." His breath caught, and for a second, neither of them moved. Then he kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was the kind of kiss that came after weeks of denying something that had been inevitable from the beginning. Her fingers curled into his coat, and his hand slid behind her neck like he'd done it 100 times before. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, "You're going to ruin me." "I think you already ruined me first." He left just before midnight, the echo of her lips still on his skin. The next morning, Georgia opened the shop to find a delivery waiting, not flowers. Paint, 6 giant cans of soft blush, cream, and pale gold with a note tucked between them. "You said you wanted to repaint the back room. I listened. Let me help." Oh, she stared at the cans for a long time, touched in a way she hadn't expected. No one had helped her with the shop since she opened it. Not once. That night, Orion showed up in worn jeans and a white t-shirt, sleeves pushed up and a trim roller in hand. "You sure you know what you're doing?" she asked, arms crossed. "I've renovated entire buildings." "Yeah, but have you ever painted a flower shop wall without ruining your shirt?" He looked at her, then dipped the roller into the tray and dragged it across the wall in one smooth stroke. "Looks like yes." She laughed, then joined him. By midnight, her shoulders ached and her hair was streaked with cream paint. But the back room glowed, warm and fresh, and he was still there, wiping her cheek with the edge of his sleeve like she was something fragile. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, then quietly, "Because you make me want a life I never thought I deserved." She didn't know what to say, but she knew then that she was in trouble too. Because Orion Blackwood, whoever he really was, had stopped being just a man who wandered in by mistake. He was becoming the very thing she never thought she'd find: home. Georgia stood in the middle of her nearly finished back room, the walls now a soft shade of moonlight cream, the scent of newly dried paint still clinging faintly to the air. She pressed her thumb into the edge of a wooden shelf to test its stability, her thoughts tangled in the way Orion had looked at her the night before like he was memorizing her. The bell above the shop door jingled, and she turned, expecting a customer. But it was a courier holding a single envelope over a black portfolio. He handed it to her without a word and left. Inside was a folded note, heavy paper, handwritten in ink that looked expensive. She unfolded it slowly for later. Oh, she opened the portfolio. Inside were blueprints. Not of a building, but of her shop, detailed, precise, drawn with architectural care. It was her exact layout except improved: a new workbench, better shelving, a skylight cut into the roof above the back room. And along the bottom of the page, in neat pencil, was a list of local contractors with notes beside each. Reliable, fair pricing, good with older structures. Georgia sat down hard on the nearest stool. She hadn't asked for any of this. But she couldn't stop her fingers from tracing the pencil lines, as if touching them might steady the sudden rush of something she didn't know what to name. That evening she called him. "Is this your way of flirting?" she asked the moment he picked up. "That depends," Orion said. "Is it working?" She exhaled, more breath than laugh. "You redesigned my entire shop." "I didn't change anything," he said. "I just saw what it could be and drew it." "Do you do that with everything? Only the things that matter?" She was quiet for a moment. "You scare me sometimes." "Why?" "Because I don't know what I'm walking into." "You're not," he said. "You're walking toward something." He paused. "Let me show you one more thing." "Tomorrow?" "Where?" "I'll send a car." The next evening, Georgia found herself standing in front of a building she'd passed a dozen times without ever noticing. It was tall, glass and stone, polished but understated, with no sign. The driver opened the door for her and gestured toward the elevator waiting inside. When it opened again, she stepped into a different world. The penthouse was hushed and vast, flooded with light from floor to ceiling windows. A wall of glass curved around the corner, revealing a skyline she'd only seen in postcards. The space was filled with soft shadows and quiet elegance, pale oak floors, a long marble kitchen island, low modern furniture. Orion stood near the window, removing his cufflinks, watching her. "You live here?" she asked, stunned. He nodded once. "This is who I am." She turned in a slow circle. "You're not just rich, no, you're not just successful." He said nothing. She searched for the word. "Untouchable." He walked toward her, stopping only when they were inches apart. "I didn't want to tell you until I knew you saw me first," he said. "Not the name, not the money, me." "I did," she said, "but this." "I know." She walked past him, needing to move. "Why flowers?" "Why me?" "I didn't have a reason at first," he admitted. "But then I realized I'd been building things for years that never made me feel anything, and then I met you and couldn't stop. You make me feel like I don't belong in your life." He stepped forward. "You're the only part that fits." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "Is there anyone else?" "No one." "Are you hiding anything else?" He didn't answer right away. "Then my father built most of this company before he died. I took over when I was 22. Everyone expects me to be him." "But I'm not." "Who are you?" "I'm trying to find out," he said. "With you." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the balcony. He followed, and they stood there together, the wind tugging gently at her coat, the city glittering below. "I don't know how to be with someone who lives up here," she whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing." "I don't either," he said. "But I know I don't want to stop." She turned toward him. "Then stop treating me like I'm breakable." That made him pause. "I don't need gifts or blueprints or chauffeurs," she continued. "I need someone who will be honest when it's messy, when it's hard. I need to know you won't disappear when I can't keep up." "I won't," he said, voice low. "I'd rather fall than run again." Her walls cracked a little more. "You're serious about this?" she asked. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small velvet box. Her heart stumbled. She opened it slowly. Inside was a key, simple, gold, unmarked. "I don't want you to feel locked out of any part of my life," he said. "Not after everything." She stared at it, then at him. "I'm not moving in," she said. "I know. I'm not ready. I'll wait." She closed the box and held it tightly. "Tomorrow," she said. "Bring your hands." He blinked. "What?" "You're helping me replant the window boxes." He smiled, just once. "Done." And for the first time, Georgia didn't feel like she was chasing something out of reach. She felt him choosing her, not with jewels, not with power, but with dirt under his nails, paint on his jeans, and a key that meant nothing unless she wanted it. And she was starting to want everything. Georgia didn't flinch when she handed Orion a trowel and said, "You're going to ruin those shoes." He crouched beside her anyway, planting himself on the sidewalk outside the shop, sleeves rolled up, pressed slacks forgotten. "They're just shoes." "No, they're probably handcrafted by someone with a name like Dario," she muttered, scooping soil into the first window box. He leaned closer. "Actually, it's Luca. I met him in Florence." She stared at him. "You're impossible. You invited me to dig in the dirt." "That's on you." The box in front of them slowly filled with trailing ivy and miniature violets. She passed him a tray of delicate white blossoms. "Those go in the center." He followed her instructions, surprisingly careful with his hands. "You ever think about expanding the shop?" "I barely keep up with it as it is," she said. "Besides, I like knowing every corner of it. There's peace in that." He nodded once, as if tucking away the thought. "You'd still know every corner even if there were more of them. You're not going to try to buy the building, are you?" "I already did." Her hands froze mid-scoop. "What?" "I had to make sure no one else would. You don't have to do anything. I just wanted you to feel safe." She sat back on her heels, processing. "You're serious. I can put it in your name if that's what you want." "I didn't ask for that." "I know," he said. "I just don't want anyone deciding the future of your shop except you." She looked at him differently then. Not with awe or suspicion, but with something deeper. The kind of gaze that said, "I see you, and I know you mean it." Later that week, he brought her to the conservatory. It had been closed to the public for renovations, but when they arrived, the gates opened silently and the halls were filled with light. Georgia's mouth parted as she stepped inside. "You did this?" "No, I just made a phone call." The air smelled like orchids and warm glass. A string quartet played softly in the far atrium, and the curved ceilings shimmered with tiny lights threaded through the steel beams. He led her to the center, where a round table had been set beneath a canopy of hanging wisteria, their petals swaying in the breeze from the open windows above. She turned to him slowly. "Orion, I wanted you to feel what I feel when I walk into your shop, like the world just got quieter." She didn't sit right away. Instead, she crossed to him and placed a hand on his chest. "You're making it hard to breathe." "Is that good?" "I think it might be." They ate dinner surrounded by roses climbing the glass walls, the city lights glimmering beyond the curved structure like distant stars. The meal was quiet, intimate, nothing like the grand galas she imagined came with his world. There were no photographers, no crowds, just them. After dessert, something with lemon and honey that melted on her tongue, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This isn't a gift," he said. "It's a question." She opened it. It was a sketch, not of a building, but of a space, a greenhouse, set behind her shop, connected by a short corridor of glass. Inside were rows of growing tables, hanging vines, a compact irrigation system. In the corner, a workbench with light streaming in from above. She looked up, eyes wide. "I want to build it with you, not for you, with you." Her voice was soft. "You really don't know how to go halfway, do you?" He shook his head. "Not when it matters." She folded the paper carefully and slid it into her bag. "Then you'd better be ready to get dirt under your nails, again." That night, he walked her home, but when they reached her door, she didn't unlock it. Instead, she turned and said, "Do you want to come in?" He hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm done pretending I don't want more." Inside, her apartment hadn't changed, but the air had. There was something unspoken between them, a trust that had taken root quietly and now bloomed without fear. She lit a candle on the windowsill, and he sat beside her on the couch, one arm draped along the back, his fingers brushing the curve of her shoulder. "I used to think love was supposed to be overwhelming," she said. "Like thunder, but this feels like gravity." He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "That's how I know it's real." In the morning, she found him already awake, barefoot in her kitchen, making coffee like he'd done it 100 times. She watched him for a moment, the way he read the label on the tin, the way he moved like he belonged. When he noticed her, he held out a mug. "I wasn't sure how you take it." "Black, same as you," he smiled, and it felt like morning light. The greenhouse went up in stages. He came by on weekends, rolled his sleeves up, and helped pour the gravel foundation. She ordered climbing roses and lavender starts, and they argued playfully over whether to add a fig tree. "I'm not running a vineyard," she said. "You could," he teased, brushing soil off her cheek. One afternoon, while soldering together a copper pipe for the watering system, he looked up and said, "I've been thinking. That's dangerous. I want to bring you to Florence and Provence and Tokyo in cherry blossom season." She didn't look up from where she was tying string trellises. "Why?" "Because I want to see those places with you in them." She set down the twine. "You're not trying to run from this, are you?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm trying to build outward from it." She stepped toward him, kissed the corner of his mouth, and whispered, "Then I'm in." The opening of the greenhouse drew a small crowd, neighbors, customers, and people who'd watched her grow from the girl who delivered single roses to the woman who now ran a blooming empire of her own. Orion stood beside her, his hand in hers, no longer the man who wandered in by mistake, but the man who chose to stay. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the glass panes, Georgia turned to him and said, "You never told me what brought you into the shop that day." He thought for a moment. "A wrong turn." She arched a brow. "But maybe it was the only right one I've ever made." She kissed him then, with the smell of jasmine in the air and music humming faintly from the street below, and in that moment there were no titles, no empires, no secrets. Just two people who had found each other in a world too loud, too fast, choosing, every day, to be still together. And that was everything. Georgia eased the glass door of the greenhouse open, her fingertips brushing the newly polished brass handle as she stepped inside. The late spring sun filtered through the paneled roof, casting a warm glow over rows of delicate blooms, hellebore, foxglove, pale thistle, all thriving beneath her care. She moved between them with quiet purpose, pruning, watering, adjusting stems, every motion practiced but never rushed. Across the room, Orion knelt by a row of climbing roses, his tie discarded, sleeves rolled high as he worked a coil of irrigation tubing into place. "You're getting faster," she said, glancing sideways at him. "I'm learning from the best. You're still overwatering those," she added, pointing to the far end of the trellis. "I'm also stubborn," he replied, not looking up. "But you knew that before you gave me a key." She crouched beside him, inspecting the leaves. "I gave you a key because you earned it, not because I thought you'd suddenly get better at watering." He leaned toward her, one knee crooked in the dirt. "You sure it wasn't because I built you a greenhouse?" She smiled, but it wasn't playful. It was soft, full of something settled. "I didn't fall for you because you gave me things, Orion. You made space for me, that's different." His hands stilled. "You changed everything." "Not everything," she said, "just what mattered." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded sheet of thick paper and handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly. It was a map, not of a city or a building of land, a long stretch of countryside outside the town, marked with soft lines and handwritten notes. "This is the orchard," he said, pointing, "and here's the old barn. There's a stream that cuts through it. And this part," he tapped a shaded corner, "I thought we could build a second greenhouse, a different kind, something open for community gardens, classes, weddings maybe." She blinked. "You bought this." "I signed the papers this morning." She stared at him, stunned. "I'm not asking you to move," he said quickly. "I'm not even asking you to decide anything now. I just wanted you to know I'm building towards something with you in it." Her heart thudded once, deep and certain. "Say something," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then she rose and walked to the center of the greenhouse. When she turned, her voice was steady. "I want to marry you." He froze. "I don't need the perfect moment or a ring. You've already done the part that matters. You stayed." Orion stood slowly. "Are you sure?" She crossed to him and took his face in her hands. "You built me a life and never once asked me to be anyone but myself." "Yes, I'm sure." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her shoulder as a deep breath shook through him. Then he stepped back, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened. "I didn't plan this. I wasn't even sure I'd use it today," he said, "but I've carried it every day since I found it." She opened it slowly. Inside was a band of brushed gold, simple, no stones, no engraving, just a single bloom etched into the inside curve, a camellia. "It means my destiny is in your hands," he said, his voice rough. She slipped it onto her finger without hesitation. "Looks like we had the same idea," she whispered. They married one quiet morning in the garden behind the greenhouse. No fanfare, no press. Just a handful of people, her closest friends, his sister from the coast, and the town's elderly florist who insisted on arranging the bouquet herself. Georgia wore a pale linen dress with tiny stitched vines along the hem. Orion wore a gray suit he picked himself, no stylist, no assistant. They exchanged vows under the arch of climbing roses they had planted on the first day the greenhouse opened. That evening they returned to the penthouse. But this time Georgia unlocked the door. He followed her inside, setting his hand on her back as they stepped into the golden light spilling across the floor. "No more hiding," she said. "No more distance," he replied. Months passed. The second greenhouse opened by autumn. It became a haven for the town children learning how to nurture seedlings. Couples exchanging vows under the glass dome, older neighbors finding peace in the scent of lavender and soil. Georgia taught classes on seasonal arrangements, and Orion quietly funded a scholarship program for local students interested in horticulture and design. He stepped back from the daily operations of his company, appointing a trusted team to run the board while he stayed close to home. Not because he was giving anything up, but because he had finally found what was worth staying for. One crisp winter morning, Georgia stood on the porch of their new farmhouse overlooking the hills. The air was sharp and clean, the frost clinging to the bare branches beyond the fence line. She heard the front door open and turned. Orion stepped out with a blanket draped over one arm. He wrapped it around her shoulders and kissed the top of her head. "You're up early," he said. "I didn't want to miss this." They stood in silence, watching the sun rise over the orchard, the light turning the frost into gold. She turned toward him. "Do you ever miss it? What? The noise, the speed, the stakes." He slid his hand into hers. "This is the highest stake I've ever had." Later, they walked down to the greenhouse together, the air warming with the day. Inside, the first crocuses were beginning to bloom. She touched one gently, smiling. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I hoped." "From the moment I saw you reach for that vase," she laughed softly. "You can't possibly remember that." "I remember everything." He pulled her into his arms and held her there while the sun rose higher, casting light through the glass, painting their future in gold and bloom. And for the first time, neither of them was waiting for something to begin, because it already had. And it was exactly where they were meant to be, together. Always.